Today is on actually literature review, uh, especially regarding contextual analysis and how we can tailor the review in different output types. So I will break that uh, as we progress into the presentation. Uh, First of all, by way of introduction, I would like to um, start by giving us a challenge, or rather introducing us to the problem that research in blockchain is faced with in Africa. Um, when you check the literature databases on either academic or organizational or policy databases, think tanks, what you will likely find out is that the researches or publications on blockchain are dominated by the perspectives, analysis, and situations in the global south. I mean, in the global north. That's the Europe, America, and other emerging technologies. In other words, Africa is sidelined or underrepresented in terms of research and development in the area of blockchain. And I want to believe that this is one of the core objectives of this center to ensure that such gaps are actually bridged by young and talented researchers like you. So, but we are presented with opportunity despite the current challenges and or underrepresentation of researches uh, on Africa regarding the blockchain development. We have opportunities to actually address these gaps by prioritizing on research and development. But the most important thing to underscore is that the development in research is not done uh, haphazardly. It has to be purposeful, it has to be intentional, and that is to say, there is important need for young researchers like you to contextualize the research in the with focus on Africa, with focus on issues surrounding Africa and how the blockchain contributes to African development. And this contextual analysis is actually summarized into four pillars. One is the infrastructure, two, the regulation, social system, and the ecosystem. Now, the essence of research in general is to identify a problem and to see how, in the end of your analysis, come off with a practical recommendation that you can build on to address the problem. Now, the best way to start with any research is through comprehensive and strategic literature review. And this is why this workshop is timely relevant, and it is very, very important as we embark into the mission of uh, quality research by the center. Now, literature review for me, and of course, I was told by many scholars, many researchers, that literature review is one of the most difficult parts of research. And at the beginning, I was actually not believing until I started conducting research and I realized that the daunting task of conducting literature review. So, what is literature review? Just a minute, please. Yeah. So, when we say literature review, first of all, what is the literature itself before we talk about reviewing it? So, literature is any publication any document, published or unpublished, being a product of research, whether qualitative research or quantitative research or observation, or even situational analysis. Once it is published or unpublished, but it is presented for already for readers, it has become a literature. And generally, you can say that in research, there are two types of literature, the qualitative and the quantitative. Now, a review of literature is not just about describing or summarizing the content of a document, be it a report or concept note or any form of literature. It's not about summarizing that content, but most importantly, critically analyzing the content by trying to understand the body of knowledge or body of works that were published around or related to the topic you are investigating. I would say that again, literature review may seem so simple by just bringing in published articles and then trying to understand what one author say about certain issue. No, it goes beyond that. A critical or robust literature review entails collection, analysis, and evaluation of wide range of published or unpublished articles or materials in order to understand the relationship between those ideas in those published articles or materials, or in order to understand the areas where there is agreement among scholars or writers, or where there is disagreement. Also, we conduct literature review in order to understand what are the current trends in a field or in an area of study. Scholars, writers keep publishing ideas every day, and especially with the coming of availability of publication platforms today, we find new researches every day at our disposal. So collection and analysis of those wide range materials or issue and trying to understand what idea or ideas those scholars are trying to communicate and where do they agree or disagree, and what is the central, when you put all the ideas together, what is the central message that the scholars or the literature is trying to portray. This is robust literature review. There are many other purposes why we conduct literature review, but most importantly, we try to understand what are the current or emerging ideas in the field, what are the findings of the researches that are being conducted, what are the methodologies, what are the issues that is still lingering among scholars. All these are identified through robust literature review. And you cannot do that if you have a handful of materials or articles at your disposal. So you need to have a wide varieties of writers or ideas for you to be able to review and find out all of this. Again, literature review is very essential, especially in the blockchain and emerging technologies like the blockchain. Blockchain researchers, especially in Africa, are faced with the challenges of, what areas are we going to be writing on, what issues. You have to go through the literature for you to find out what issues have been discussed by previous scholars, and what is the gap that is not addressed by the researchers, so that you can be able to meaningfully address that gap by trying to come up with your research that fit into that area that is not well researched. Also, we conduct literature review in order to show or to familiarize ourselves with the area that we are interested in researching. That is why many professors, if you are undergoing advanced degrees, they will first, before you even draft a topic, ask you to go and research or review literature. By so doing, you will even understand, or you will have better idea of the topic that you are interested in. And through the literature mapping and review, you'll be able to identify gaps. Okay, a lot have been written on this and that, but what are the issues that you have in mind that is not well addressed by the previous researchers? And you identify gap through literature review. This is even more important for blockchain researchers like you, for you to identify the gaps in Africa. Just before this presentation, I searched Google Scholar using the Boolean blockchain and Africa. I found there are nearly or barely 12,000 publications that carry the terms blockchain and Africa. When I make similar search using China, I discovered there are over 40,000 publications that bear or that have in their either keywords or topic blockchain and China. I have done that across many regions, many continents, and I discovered that Africa is grossly underrepresented in terms of research, especially related to the blockchain technology. And this is a very golden opportunity for upcoming researchers like you. Again, why do we conduct literature review is to avoid reinvention of ideas. I mean, I'll tell you a story of a friend of mine who we did masters together. After completing all the work, including data collection, he went online to search for materials to add to his discussions of findings. Unfortunately for him, he found a research conducted some few months or years back that have the same, or closely the same or rather similar topic as he has. He was confused, and that could have been avoided if he had done robust literature review. So the essence of literature review is not just to publish, no, we are doing it to bridge a gap in knowledge. And therefore, it is very essential for researchers to conduct literature review before even finalizing the topic, because you may eventually, if not carefully done, finish your study, publish it, and you find someone who has done a similar research, and therefore your work is actually not as recognized as it should be. Lastly, we build on for a foundation. I mean, blockchain researches are emerging research areas. You cannot compare the blockchain technology with other technologies that have been there for a long time. Therefore, the researches we read about blockchain will inform us about the best choice of theory and framework that we may use in our researches. If you are struggling to find out which theory shall I use, go to the literature and you will find someone who has done a similar study maybe elsewhere beyond Africa, and you may copy or adopt similar framework or theory. Now, there are different types of literature review, but in summary, I have these 6 for our discussion today. The most common one is the narrative approach to literature review. And what the researchers does under this is just to summarize and discuss ideas of the previous researchers. And usually the questions that are addressed using this pattern is what question? What is the problem? Then you go to the literature, you find researchers who have talked about the problem. They describe the problem. In other words, narrative literature review is like descriptive literature review. You're just describing the concept in your topic using the existing literature. Scoping. This is more or less more relevant to emerging disciplines, emerging field of study like the blockchain. Scoping is the art of trying to understand the extent of researches conducted in a field of study. Therefore, you are not interested in analyzing what the author says or said, but rather trying to understand the length and breadth of publications or researches published around your topic so that you can be able to measure the volume of studies that are conducted for you to cite or create your own topic and establish your research and try to bridge the gap. Systematic is also very commonly used by researchers. And what you do in systematic is trying to, especially this method is widely used in issues or areas of study that have been widely researched. So you synthesize the ideas of the previous authors so that you can be able to understand why things happen the way they are, what are the opinions, what are the data, what are the evidences in different contexts, in different geographical areas, in different or across different dimensions. So systematic review or literature review is carried out in an area or specific issues that have been widely researched and there are enough evidences, enough material. So what you do is trying to have a fuller understanding of the debates, of the issues that are being discussed with concrete evidences. And that is why you can see under the key question that is usually asked on this type of review is what does the evidence say? Because the evidence is there. Meta-analysis, this is usually statistical kind of review. And this one also is done when there is an existing body of knowledge that are empirical and that are quantitative in nature. And what you do is to combine various studies and establish average. On average, what is or what are the messages or the ideas of these scholars? On average, what is the GDP? On average, what is the poverty or unemployment rate based on the findings of multiple scholars? On average, what is or what are the economic consequences of COVID-19? all of these kind of analysis is done under meta-analysis. It's usually done through quantitative literature review. And the question is that is asked is, what is the combined effect of multiple findings of multiple data that is found from the field? Critical literature review is also to evaluate the quality and the conflict or otherwise agreement or disagreement of scholars in a field. So you are not just accepting the ideas of scholars at face value. No, you dig deeper to see where there are also conflict. Because researchers are human beings, sometimes there is what we call researchers bias. And if you dig deeper, you may find conflicting opinion, conflicting findings, and that will help your analysis. Lastly, integrative literature review is trying to combine or what is called triangulation. You use multiple data sources, multiple kind of researches together in order to come up with your findings on the topic of your interest. So there are specific types of study use or types of literature review use or suitable for blockchain research. And I bring these to narrative scoping, systematic, and critical analysis. These are most relevant for blockchain research. And for all of these, before you choose any kind of literature review, the first question you ask yourself is, what type of question do I have? Because it is the kind of the research question that you have that will actually determine the kind of literature review that you would adopt. Now let's move further to the practical strategies that are followed in conducting robust and comprehensive literature review. And I break this into these two distinctive or these two uh, segments or processes. The first is planning. Before you start conducting literature review, you plan. I mean, literature review is a very strategic and a scientific endeavor, so you need to plan before you embark on it. And the first thing you do under the planning is to start your defining your research question. Because the nature of your research question, as we have seen previously, will determine your data sources. So it is very important to define your research questions for you to be able to know where do you go to find your data for review. The second stage is to develop a protocol. Protocol is like a roadmap, step-by-step procedure that you will follow in order to complete the task of reviewing literature. These are all important because if you don't have proper planning, you will have huge information at your disposal and you will not be able to synthesize, connect, and make sense of them. The third stage is to design how do you conduct your search, the search for the literature. What kind of databases you are going to use, what keyword, what Boolean are you going to use to actually find relevant literature. You know, the internet today, thankfully, has provided us with full of material, full of information, full of literature. I mean, I'm just wondering what those before us, like 20 years, 30 years before now, if they want to conduct literature review, they have to go to the library and use hard copy, materials in the library. Today, we have digital electronic databases that we straightforward go to and generate our literature. But even those databases are are, 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 are so the databases are categorized depending on the kind of research questions you have. For example, if you are conducting research on blockchain, there are suitable databases for you. Those who are conducting review of literature on, say, another field, social science, there are suitable databases for their materials. So first of all, know what you are going to research on, and that is what you should do at the first stage of defining your research question. Databases, we are going to discuss more on them, such as IEEE Explore for those who are conducting researches related to blockchain. Is very, very useful because it contains qualitative academic materials. Keywords. What kind of keywords are you going to use to find relevant material? Many researchers struggle to actually find relevant materials. I mean, I have heard, complaints amongst colleagues and sometimes students coming to you to say there is no enough, or there is no even, as they will say, there is no materials on this topic. And I will be wondering, really, how did you search for the material? And I will discover that the problem is actually designing the keywords that will help the student or the researcher to find relevant material. So the keywords are very, very important. And I think what I advise on this is that you try to develop keywords from your research questions so that you can be able to find materials focusing on your topic. Otherwise, you will have full of literature and that are not relevant to your topic, and you will have to take time. You will have to spend much time trying to sort out. Imagine reading through hundreds of literature just to discover that only 10 are relevant to your topic. That is, disappointing. So it is important that we develop specific and words that are addressing our research question. And the Boolean are also similar to the keywords. They are the key terms that we use in finding materials relevant to our topic, either on Scopus, on Google Scholar, ResearchGate, etc., etc. The number 4 step under the planning is hand search and gray literature. Apart from academic databases or databases specific for academic researches and journals, we have the general search engine. That's the one we are mostly or commonly used, the Google. That is a great search engine because it will give you everything. There is no specification of the literature that you find from the Google. It gives you everything, including conference papers, reports, and even opinion poll of people or researchers. And the second segment is actually screening and assessment, and lastly, synthesis of the literature that you find either from stage number 3 or 4. The first you do is to start reading through the literature to find the relevance or otherwise of the material before you keep it for your review. And how do you do that? You start with the title of the literature. Title of the published material, whether it is a journal, whether it is a book, a report, any material that you come across. The first thing you do to determine whether it is relevant to your topic and it will be useful for your literature review is the title. Is the title relevant to your research question? Ask this question. If it is yes, fine, you are good to go. You keep it aside. If it is not, you exclude it or deselect that published material. After the title, then you move to the abstract. Most published materials, especially journals, have abstracts. The abstracts are summaries of the content of the published material. So you read the abstract. From the abstract, you'll be able to understand whether this literature is actually relevant or not. And then if it is relevant, you move into the full text and read everything from the introduction, analysis, methodology up to the conclusions of the material or of the journal or book. The second stage is to assess the quality of the study. One disadvantage of the internet today is that it allows everyone to self-publish. If you have any idea, you can just write it now and then go to either ResearchGate or what do they call it, academia, or even the internet. You just publish it on your page and it has become a published material. Now, if you're conducting a serious research, as researchers, we have to be very careful of the quality of the ideas that we use in our research. Therefore, after going through the text, you will find out using your judgment, using your cognitive capacity to understand whether the methodology used is correct, whether the findings are actually valid, and what are the positions of the author or authors. And then you judge whether you are going to use that on the basis of this quality or not. Assuming it is useful to you and you are satisfied with the quality, then you move to the next stage. Then you systematically extract the relevant information from that material or article. And how do you do that is the next step. Synthesize the findings. Usually what you do in literature review is you go what is called thematic literature review, themes. From your research questions, you develop themes. And those themes are the building blocks of your literature review. So your review, in order to make it organized, coherent, and clear, you organize your review of literature into themes and sub-themes. And therefore, if you come across a relevant material and you are comfortable, you are satisfied with the quality and validity, you extract relevant point and then put it at the relevant theme. Now, finally, assess the overall bias. After completing the extraction and synthesis of your findings or the findings from the literature, discuss the ideas of all the authors, not a single author now, under each team. What is the main idea? What are the areas where the authors agree? And what are the areas where the author disagree? That is a conflict of interest or conflict of opinion or conflict of findings. All these are happening, and a systematic, robust, comprehensive literature review should be able to pinpoint all these uh, consensus and conflict among scholars. Otherwise, you just have a summary of literature but not a comprehensive literature review. Now, with these processes, let's move to discussing the key sources of this literature. Like I said, we have the academic databases where there are mainly academic and scholarly materials. The popular ones and the most widely recognized and recommended ones are the Google Scholar, Scopus, Web of Science, IEEE Explore, etc., etc. Now, for the purpose of you young researchers like you, especially members of the ASBR, the ASBR itself has a database. I mean, from what I read on the website, they have a repository of publications by members of the community. It will be very useful for you in the future as you write, as you conduct researches. And then, of course, there are similar knowledge hubs that are contextual, that are based on African context that can be useful in your analysis. So these are all very important sources of literature. Other sources include the government and NGO and civil society reports, especially the publishing or discussing issues related to blockchain, whether it is on regulation, whether they are giving you the economic or social context. In Africa, they are all relevant in your future endeavors. And then you have also African tech conferences, news. They are all so important and very, very relevant sources of literature for your review in the course of your research. So let's go into a very cardinal point when discussing literature review today. I mean, you are all aware, or perhaps even more than me, that the role of AI in literature review cannot be overemphasized. Even though there are a series of debates on the role or the use of AI in research, but the popular opinion and I think the position of most president of universities in the world is that AI has come to stay, and the earlier we accept it, the better for our researchers. I mean, AI is not a tool that researchers use to engage in plagiarism. No, they said AI is a research assistant. How? First, AI helps researchers to generate ideas. Before you come or draft your research questions, you can use AI to actually review, discuss heavily your ideas with AI interactively, and then it will be very useful for you in consolidating and enriching your research questions. I mean, it is allowed for researchers to do this. In fact, Scopus AI has a component in it where it gives research gaps in different fields. It shows areas that are under researched based on the researches that are concentrated in the Scopus database. It analyzes the volume of the research and identify areas that are under researched and help researchers or suggest for researchers to actually undertake such areas of study or bridge that gap. So example of this is you can try to chat with the AI on challenges of blockchain, for example, for cross-border payments in Africa. It will show you whether there are quite a number of studies on this issue or not, and it will help you in framing or reframing the topic to produce a comprehensive and quality research. Another important aspect of the use of AI in literature review is, I mean, before we go that, the idea generation, like I have used AI in many instances to search for materials. Now, lately, I don't even go to Scopus and Google Scholar. Once I have a topic that I want to write on, I will just go to Perplexity and other AIs and just input my keywords and booleans, and then the AI will generate quality research papers related to that topic. It's very, very useful. It helps a lot. Now, discovery, second part of the use of AI, is a tool such as, or AI such as Illicit AI, Consensus AI, Scopus AI. These are all familiar and they help us to generate reports and conduct systematic review of literature. Third, summarization. It is not easy to actually read multiple papers and try to understand the central ideas of the papers. It is allowed for students and researchers to use AI to generate summaries of findings or summaries of papers that they are interested in reviewing. There is what they call annotated bibliography. Annotated bibliography is summarization of the articles that you want to review. Depending on the format or the ideas that you are interested in the article, just upload the article, ask AI to, if for instance you are interested in the findings, just ask AI, generate the findings of this research, and it will come up with it. I mean, scholars, researchers are allowed to do this, and it is said that it saves 50% of the time that you will take to do that manually, and you may not even be as effective and efficient as the AI. However, there is need for caution. The coming of AI should not undermine academic integrity, researchers' integrity. We are known to be honest. We are expected by ethical principles to report things the way they are, to avoid plagiarism as much as we can. I mean, there is no room for plagiarism by whatever reason. So it is very important that when we use AI, we verify. That is why it is not, there are some AIs that are not good for research because they are actually hallucinating. For example, ChatGPT may not give you exact and accurate uh, ideas from a published article. I have tried ChatGPT many times, and
Yes.
ChatGPT will give me, sorry? Is someone asking a question?
No, no, no.
Oh, okay, good. So, like, I've tried ChatGPT many times, and it actually fails. It will give me a response, and I will ask for a clickable and downloadable link to that source, and the response is usually were usually negative, and that is why I've stopped using ChatGPT for research purposes. There are other, AIs that you can use for uh, research, such as Cloud AI, Scopus AI, Perplexities. These are all very useful because they give you the material, like they give you the source. This is where I generate the idea from. It will highlight for you to see for yourself. Number three is to ensure critical synthesis. Means some AI tools are very poor at that. And if you are not able to do that, I mean, how could you claim that this idea is yours if you are not the one that synthesized the ideas? And this is where it's not advisable for researchers to completely rely on AI for their review. AI can help you generate the sources, but you should be the one to synthesize because the synthesization is the main task of the researcher. Because that is where you claim that this work is mine and is a product of my intellectuality. So the best practice, use AI to start your research, not to write your review. It is really discouraging. I think we have talked much on this. Uh, it, we can move further. Critical analysis and gaps identification. Critical analysis of what? The literature that we generate. How do we critically analyze the literature, the relevant literature, assuming we have gotten relevant literature? How do we critically analyze the literature and identify gaps? Like I said earlier, one of the fundamental purposes of literature review is to identify gaps. We are going to see how to do that. Now, there are 5 questions to exhaust in order to evaluate the quality of the literature that we are interested in. The first is the methodology. You all know methodology is the design, the research design. The population, the sampling technique, the data sources, the techniques of data collection used, and the techniques or method of analysis adopted. All of these make up the methodology of the paper or of the article. Now you ask yourself, after going through all of this, ask yourself, are these relevant? Are these appropriately used in this study? And you can do that by comparing between researches. if this researcher uses this methodology, why does this researcher chooses to do this or to adopt a different methodology? And that opens your critical thinking capacity as a researcher. And if there are no adequate evidence to prove the appropriateness of the use of different methodologies, then you begin to question which of the two articles actually is having a wrong methodology. For example, I will give you, if a study uses a sample of 30 participants and another study uses 1,500, I mean, intuitively, which one is likely to be more valid and credible? Again, in terms of the credibility of the data, if someone tells you that he collected 1,500 data from a respondent in 2 or 3 days, that should also ring a bell, and you should begin to think the possibility of doing that, even with technology. So these are some of the questions that you intuitively ask yourself, having the knowledge of research methodology, try to prove or to evaluate the appropriateness of the methodology adopted by researchers before you decide to use their ideas. Because I can guarantee you there are many researches, many poor researches conducted and published in highly reputable journals. We have to take this into account. Many researchers are cutting corners today, conniving with publishers, conniving with their research assistant to cook data and just publish it because of the pressure to publish in the academic environment. Now let's go further. The second critical question to ask is the evidence. Is the evidence, is the data empirical or anecdotal? Anecdotal data is the data more or less on personal sentiment, what the author is saying from his personal view. That's armchair research. That is not a good research findings. A good research findings or evidence should be based on the data that is collected either from the field, primary data or secondary data, not personal opinion of the researcher. That is why research is different from opinion poll or columns written on the pages of newspapers. Because research, what makes research is the scientific processes that have been applied in it. There are stages, there are rules, there are methods that are adopted, and that is what makes research a science. And therefore, the evidence from the research must be scientific, based on evidence, based on data, not personal opinion. Assumptions. The critical questions also to ask is what are the assumptions of these ideas? I mean, having presented this data, like sometimes data do not speak. You need to interpret the data. Now, the critical question you ask when you see a data in a research is, what is the assumption? What is this data saying? I mean, and don't limit yourself to the assumptions that are on the surface. Try to dig deep and find the hidden assumptions of the data. And that is what makes you a researcher. Ability to see things beyond the surface, ability to critically analyze data statement based on your critical thinking mindset. The next is gaps. Having read or gone through the literature, you ask yourself, okay, if this is found, okay, what is not found? There is always this question that should come up from your mind. This is the findings. Okay, what is not found from this study? Some researchers make effort to include the limitations of their studies, but others don't. So in case you read literature that the gaps or the missing, the limitations are not mentioned, try to intuitively, critically pinpoint what are missing in that literature. It will help you in making the synthesis or review or systematic review of your literature. The last is conflict. When you read wide range of literatures or literature, many authors speak on the same topic. Try to group those authors or the ideas of those authors into two, where there is consensus and where there is conflict. Which findings are contradicting which study? Try to do this analysis, and from there, you will also find many answers to your question. So the central argument here is it is through critical analysis of literature that you are going to question the existing ideas and thereby making effort to bring or bridge that gap by creating your research or by making your analysis. Because in the process of literature review, there is what is called pinching. When there is agreement and disagreement among scholars on an issue, then what is your view? What is your understanding? You try to bridge that gap by bringing in your own understanding and your own view, the discussion. So therefore, you are not just summarizing, but you are critically evaluating, critically analyzing the ideas presented by the scholars. Identification of research gaps. This is also a very important aspect of literature review, as I said again and again. Now, we look out for how many gaps? We look out for different gaps. For example, in the context of blockchain research, you look at geographical or contextual gaps. As we have said in our introductory part, most of the literatures in blockchain are from outside of Africa. Now, even within Africa, there are still geographical context. So when you read the literature, try to identify where is the literature concentrated. Is it in East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, or in Central Africa, or in West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana? And therefore, if the researches are concentrated in this part of the continent, where should we also investigate so that we have comprehensive and diverse ideas on the topic? The second is population gap. Most researches on blockchain, I'm not so exposed on blockchain, but most of the population that have been investigated on the issue of blockchain are the educated population. I don't know, I may be wrong. But then in your review of literature, you will find out whether a particular population is represented, overrepresented, or underrepresented in the researches conducted so far. And that will help you to identify population gaps, maybe in terms of age, in terms of gender, in terms of educational background, etc., etc. All these are gaps in the population that we are likely to identify in the course of a review of literature. Temporal gaps. This is time um, duration or time of studies period that the studies on blockchain cover. I mean, from which period to which period do we have more studies on blockchain and why? And why didn't we? Why are we? Then you try to understand the trend and the pattern of the studies conducted within those periods. For example, between 2020, when we have COVID, to 2025, which year has more studies on blockchain and why? And that will help you to find out um, a lot on why studies are conducted, when, and where. In terms of mechanisms, this has to do with practical application of blockchain research. For example, it is obvious that blockchain comes to ensure financial inclusivity. Many studies on the economic or socio-economic aspect of blockchain may have this kind of findings. But the question is, has these findings translated to actual economic transformation? What happens with the recommendations of the studies? So these kinds of gaps or these kinds of questions may likely to come out of the review of literature. And lastly, methodological gaps. Which method is adopted by which researcher and which one is most appropriate? This is very, very important. Methodology is the engine of every research. If it is faulty, then the entire research is faulty. And this is why we have to be very careful on our choices of methodology. Haven't said much on this. Now let's go to the context. Contextual analysis of the literature that we are reviewing. How do we contextualize the analysis? Now, these contexts are tailored specifically for researches in blockchain. For example, in Africa, most of, if not all, researches on blockchain are related to these four contexts. Regulatory context, where that is the issue of conducting studies on regulation of blockchain. There has been this debate amongst various governments, various legislations were made, various decisions were taken by governments on the use of, for instance, crypto, digital asset, and of course, the issue of data privacy. Now, many studies may focus on this. Other studies may focus on the infrastructure. For example, the internet penetration in Africa, smartphone access, mobile money ecosystem, etc., etc. Other studies could also focus on the socio-economic context of blockchain, the financial inclusion levels in Africa, informal economies, the traders, and the cross-border trading pattern uh, in Africa. The last context, the institutional context. What is the level of trust in government? The legacy system example, the old system of land registry and voting. I mean, blockchain is popularizing or advancing what is called, is it digital token? In place of land registry. And then there's what also quadratic voting also that is.
Sai a cire ka aure ya kamar da zai dinga ba su wani abu tunda dan majalisa speaker yana ba ku wani abu kai kuma baka kawo wa kanka wani abu.
Okay. Now let me ask, is there any other context that is missing from this, especially with regards to blockchain researches in Africa?
Come again with the questions, sir.
Okay. I said, based on my preliminary research for this presentation, I identified 4 contexts or 4 dimensions of researches conducted related to blockchain. In other words, blockchain researches in Africa can be categorized into these 4 contexts in my preliminary understanding. Now, as professionals and researchers in the field, is there any other context that I am missing from my? Is there any other context that I should add to this 4?
I think most likely these are just broader segments. Yeah, so they cover almost everything. Whatever
Okay.
you are going to add is less compared to these 4 categories. You can see regulatory, infrastructure, and socio-economic, which deals with finance. And finance is even the larger part, or let's say the larger segment of it. So I think these 4 are just the broader categories. So anything that comes should be within, not outside.
Oh, interesting. Thank you.
I
Thank you.
agree with you, 100%.
Okay, Suleiman, are we on the same page?
Yes, sir, we are.
Oh, great. Thank you. Now let's make progress. Why this context matters in our discussion today? Why do we bother about the context of blockchain researches in Africa? I think there are 4 cardinal reasons. One is to ensure accurate interpretation. I mean, for us to be able to understand the findings of studies conducted around blockchain and to interpret them well, we need to categorize them. The example here is the prepositions on a high trust and low trust environment. I mean, in Africa, people are wary to use the blockchain technology and leading to some countries being highly trustful and others not, because probably of the behaviors and the body language of the government. And again, we categorize or contextualize the review of researches in blockchain in order to highlight contingency. This contingency is showing that success of the blockchain development depends on specific local condition. I mean, blockchain technology might not work across the board. There is need for contextualization of what should be applied where and when, maybe considering the government regulation, the behaviors of the population, the infrastructure on ground, etc., etc., and including even the economy of the people. All these are very determinant factors of the application of blockchain in economy, in social activities of the people. Third is to also reveal the limitation. If you are very categorical in your analysis, you can be able to easily identify gaps and barriers. It will help you rather than packing everything together. If you contextualize your discussions and your analysis, you can be able to know in this context, what are my boundaries and what are the limitations. So this is also why we contextualize issues. And lastly, is in order to demonstrate impact. If you want to measure the impact of development in blockchain, we need to take them into context. For example, in terms of infrastructure, where are we? Internet penetration in Africa, what is the level? What is the percentage? How many people can afford internet? This is also essential, and it will help us to, again, understand the economy of the people. Which country is economically stable or more economically stable than another? And in terms of the regulatory framework, which country is likely to have a conducive environment for blockchain development? And these are the reasons why, some of the reasons why we contextualize the issues. Now, the third and last segment of the presentation today is output types and tailoring. Having identified the literature you use and critically analyzed the literature, how do you produce the literature? In what form? In what format are you producing the literature? There are many different outputs. Let's see some of them. At the end of your literature review, you are likely writing a final year project, master's dissertation, or PhD thesis. Or you are likely writing a PowerPoint presentation for a conference presentation or a workshop presentation like mine. Or probably you are reviewing the literature in order to write a concept note, an abstract or executive summary, policy brief or technical brief. Or you want to have more insight in order to write a position paper, white paper, or popularly the journal article. There may be other kinds of output, but let's limit this for the context or for the purpose of our presentation today. We are going to look at each of these output and see how they differ from each other. But before then, why do we tailor our research output in different formats and output, in different types and output? The reason is, One is the audience. The nature of the audience that may likely read your published material will determine the output type. Some audience are university examiners. Maybe you are project professor, you are project supervisor or professor. Or they are policymakers or the general public. Each of these groups has a different expectation, different capacity, and different understanding of the subject matter that you may be writing on. The second one is format. The format dictates detail. The kind of format you choose to produce your research output will determine the length. For example, if you want to write a poster research is just a one page, and you don't expect it to be bulky. And therefore, you may have few words and few bullet points. But if you are submitting a thesis or dissertation, it has to be lengthy, maybe 50 pages or more. Now, the third reason why we tailor our research output is focus. If you are seeking a PhD like me, the way you produce your literature review is different from if you are actually trying to push an agenda for a change in blockchain strategy for the government or for a minister of economy, communication and digital economy in Nigeria. So in any case, the goal, the detail, and the audience determine why you need to tailor your research output or the product or the output of your literature review. Because effective tailoring, like it said here, it increases clarity, engagement, and impact. Now, let's take these output types one by one and see how they differ from one another. The research report. Like I said, when you are reviewing literature for the purpose of presentation for either PhD or master's, the characteristics of the research report is likely to be like this. It is likely to be in-depth and detailed in the manner you present it. It has formal structure from introduction, literature review, methodology, findings, discussions, up to conclusion. It has full citations and references at the end. And during the review of the literature, the researcher is expected to critically analyze the literature, engage the literature, and try to identify gaps. And the purpose of such kind of research output is submitting your research thesis, dissertation, or a detailed research report. Sometimes, as a firm, you may conduct a research for a donor agency or an NGO, and at the end of your field survey, you are expected to produce a comprehensive research report, and it is likely to be in this format. Another output type is PowerPoint or conference presentation. It is concise, short, with bullet points, and with visual emphasis such as charts, images, diagram, etc., etc. There are minimal text because the images should be able to communicate, and they do communicate more than words. And focus on the narrative and the key takeaways. PowerPoint presentation is focusing on the key messages that the audience should actually capture. And like I said, we present PowerPoint for seminars, conferences, or stakeholders meetings, etc. The next output is research poster. Like I said, research poster is a one-pager summary of everything that you have in the research, from introduction up to conclusion, in one page. It is high impact, visual summary, very brief, and use headings and bullet points. It has very easy to follow format, usually designed for 3 to 5 maximum minutes of reading if you are interested in reading. And the purpose of it is academic poster sessions. In some conferences, people choose to do poster presentation, just one page of their research findings, and they will just post it somewhere, and the participant will take a glance of it, even in the process of walking around. Because people do not have time. Remember, no matter how brilliant your ideas are, if you don't find a way to communicate them, they are just useless. We have to be very aware of this. So next is executive summary and abstract. Executive summary, from the word executive, you know that your target audience are people holding executive powers, people who are too busy attending meetings, reading memos. They don't have time to go through your 150 pages document. Therefore, you summarize everything in 100 to 300 words. And those few words should be able to cover the problem, method, result, conclusion, and practical recommendations. By way of design, every word used in the summary must be very useful. There's no redundant word, ideally. So we submit executive summary to president, managing directors, and top managers for them to take a look at our research findings and engage with it. And then, of course, the abstract is submitted for conferences. Technical policy briefs. They are also targeted to policymakers. The use of jargon is discouraged. Clear language in an executive summary kinds of way or style. Focus on implications. These are the focus of technical brief. What is the implications of whatever you are saying? They don't care of whatever you are saying. Just they will focus on what is the consequences of what you found, and then recommendation. These are the two most important parts of policy briefs or technical briefs. They are short, direct, and focus on practical relevance. How do they act on it? So you target this, or we write policy briefs when we are advising government agencies, NGOs, or industry partners on issues that are relevant to them. Okay. Sorry, I have to be a bit faster, but we are almost there. White paper is also like executive summary or policy brief. But the purpose of white paper is to persuade a government or a leader to do certain things. You are proposing an alternative solutions to a problem. So in doing this, you have to be very detailed in your analysis, and you support everything you say with evidence and data, especially statistical data. Leaders, policymakers like statistical data. They want to see percentage, they want to see rate, they want to see average and statistical terms like that. So that's white paper. Another or last output is the concept note. Many of us that have worked with NGOs would probably have better understanding of the concept note. Sometimes if you are looking for funding to conduct a research or a project, you don't have to wait for someone to identify you. No, you identify somebody who is likely to fund you, and then you write a compelling and persuasive note that could likely attract funding for you. And the concept note includes the objective, background, problem, expected outcome. This is very, very key. Expected results. When you say that you are going to do this and that in the objectives, you have to tell them what will be the outcome of your intervention of your project. And then it has to be attached with the budget, because they need to know whether they have money to fund that or not. And they need to know whether it is cost effective or not. But sometimes you may not require to attach the budget. It is also very clear output, very short, 1 to 3 pages, and you submit it to funding agencies, collaborators, supervisors, and decision makers. So the purpose of concept notes is to introduce a project idea, typically used to generate feedback or to even spark interest of the stakeholders, partners, or funders on the issue. I think many of us researching on blockchain have this opportunity. And I do hope many of you are working towards this. Position paper is also like the white paper. I will skip that due to time. Now, example of how to tailor the output. For example, if you have this topic, blockchain for land registry in East Africa, in your literature review, if you are writing a review in form of thesis or report, you are likely going to cite scholars. For example, Ali 2021 highlights issues with data digitalization in Kenya, while Mensah emphasizes the critical role of traditional leadership structure in Nigeria. Something like this. But if the output is PowerPoint presentation, you will likely have a headline like, can blockchain secure land rights? And then you promise transparency, reality, paper records, traditional leaders. So you tell them the opportunity that blockchain is likely to bring to the land registry, that is transparency, versus the old way paper record of land registry. If it is a policy brief, you may have a headline like a past implementation plan. Like I said, policy brief are targeted toward policy implementation. Your suggestion or your recommendations are mainly for policy implementation. So your headline should be like a past implementation plan, digitize paper record first, pilot with community leaders. So if you look at the last two output, represent what this text in the report is saying in a more attractive, more concise way. And this is example of how the tailoring is done to produce different output type. Now, practical steps for tailoring. I've mentioned some of them. You identify your audience, define your purpose, select key points, adjust depth and language. Don't be too technical. Be clear depending on who is reading. You know, the politicians, the leaders do not have time to be searching for meaning of the words that you used in writing your policy brief. So the language used if you are targeting politicians or policymakers must be clear. Choose your medium. Are you using text, visual, or mixed, or both? And then apply the format convention and you produce the output. These are the steps that you follow to tailor the different output based on the literature you review. We are getting there. In conclusion, literature review, remember, is not a summary of published or literature, published articles, materials, or literature, but rather synthesizing global knowledge in order to build or identify gaps. The essence of literature review, I repeat, is very important. It's not to summarize the ideas of a particular research output, but rather to evaluate, to analyze what multiple authors agree on issue or disagree. And you try to find out what are the emerging issues and what are the consensus regarding the topic. Again, contextual analysis is very, very important because it adds meaning. It helps you to analyze the uniqueness of Africa in terms of regulation, infrastructure, socio-economic landscape. How is Africa different from other parts of the world? Tailoring is also important. It helps us to produce a very clear, concise work that is understandable by our target audience. And not only understandable, but also relevant, and that which can be acted upon because of its clarity by our target audience. In the context of the center, the ASBR, researchers like you are not just technical experts, as I said, but skilled communicators. You have to master the science and art of communication because you are interested in bridging gaps between blockchain technology and African development. And to do that, your ideas must be fully understood and must be well communicated. And with this, I want to say thank you for listening, and I am here to answer questions that you may have for me.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Okash, for that insightful and enlightening presentation. Moving to the question and answer section. Please, if you have any question, please can you signify by raising your hands. We'll be taking 2 questions only.
Questions? your comment, even addition, if you find
Good
some.
afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, correct?
Okay, thank you so much for this wonderful session. It came at a very crucial moment where most of us are trying to start our research journey. So I have a question. So on my research, I've been trying to get existing literatures to sort of do my literature review, and during the process I found an article that already like explained and already did what I wanted to do. But then it lacked what I noticed about the article, because I took my time to like read it and try to see the whole process, or the thought process of the article, and I discovered that it was more general. It lacked the specifics that my research had, and most importantly, it lacked the African perspective that my research proposed to have, or proposed to like address. So I wanted to ask, of what significance would this article that I had already discovered have over my own research that I wanted to do? That I want to do.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you very much for this brilliant question. I think I'm very glad that you asked this question. So, like I have mentioned, we conduct research because there are gaps. First of all, already there is a geographical gap. I mean, he conducted the research elsewhere and you want to conduct the research in Africa. That alone justifies you to go ahead and conduct your study. And of course, his research could be very useful to you because it's like a mirror for you to understand the right methodology to use. The research already published on the same area that you want to do yours may inform your choice of methodology. And there is nothing wrong in adopting. In fact, what is even encouraged is to adapt methodology. It's fine because the processes of formulating a new methodology, especially if you want to go to the field to collect data, developing your protocol, your questionnaire, interview guides, is a lot very, very difficult. But if someone has done a similar research elsewhere, you can easily adapt the protocol with permission of the author and then just apply it. You are bridging a geographical and contextual gaps. And I can guarantee you that your findings will be very, very relevant for comparative analysis. So this is a short response to your question.
Right, thank you so much, sir. I'm sorry. I wanted to like seek more clarification, because the research in question, it looked like something that was published in a conference journal.
Okay.
So it was like a 2 to 3 page paper. So it lacked all of this. It lacks all of this this methodology and literature. It had no literature review, no methodology, nothing that was adopted. It was just like a normal article. I wouldn't call it.
Yeah. In that case, you just go ahead. It means you assume that there is no the research has not been conducted, because you cannot consider it a comprehensive, not even comprehensive, but quality research output without all of these parts that you mentioned that are missing. So just go ahead with your research, but you can actually intensify searches and ensure that there are no other similar studies elsewhere. But as far as that is concerned, we may not consider that as a full and quality research because it lacks methodology, no even literature review. So it shouldn't discourage you from going ahead to conduct your research. So
Thank you, sir.
just know that other people are interested in the same topic. So that should also serve as a motivation.
All right, thank
Thank
you
you, sir.
for your question, and thank you, Mr. Cash, for that response. So we've come to an end of the question and answer section. And on behalf of Africa Center of Excellence in Blockchain Research, I want to express our sincere appreciation to Mr. Okash for sharing his expertise and experience with us today. And to everyone who participated, thank you for taking the time to join us. And we hope you really enjoyed this section. Do have a good day.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Sorry, will there be sharing of the slides to the audience? Are we going to do that? Ishoma?
Yes, we will.